So today we are talking about how to use technology to mitigate record-keeping fines. And I think what we have seen since the start of this year, particularly the regulators in North America and Europe, has imposed more than $2 billion worth of fine on a number of financial institutions that includes banks, stock exchanges, financial market infrastructure organizations, brokerage firms, independent financial advisors, and insurers. So in this webinar today, we are going to take a look at closely at organizations who has been fined for record-keeping failures. We're also going to listen from David Gold, who's joined us from Encompass in terms of technology solutions, and we're going to share our perspectives to how to create a right technology infrastructure so that you as an organization can manage your record-keeping well, and obviously you do well and not get fined.
Welcome all, and thank you for attending ICAG's Partners' second webinar. Please note all attendees will be muted. If there are any questions, those surely will be attended in the end of the seminar. I am Vidyesh Mishra, Senior Manager at ICAG Partners with 18+ years of experience in data management and financial operations. I will be handling the chat and will be providing assistance during the webinar. ICAG stands for International Consulting and Advisory Group. We expertise in financial services on a range of core areas, including risk and regulations, strategy and digital, change and execution, record management, and ESG. The guest for today's webinar is David Gold. I would like to invite him to tell us more about his current role, record management experience, and one key takeaway for our audience for today's session.
Thanks, Vidyesh. I appreciate that. Welcome to our audience, wherever you may be. It's great to be here with our friends at ICAG. My name is David Gold. I've worked almost 20 years now in records data management with very large enterprises around the world, in the UK, Europe, and US and Asia. And the bottom line is that I think for the first time, we are seeing a really significant shift in how enterprises value the power and potential of records, not only just to avoid fines, which is really the core subject of our discussion today, but also to help drive issues around privacy, around business initiatives. The bottom line for us at Encompass is that organizations are sitting on the most important business information that an enterprise keeps. And the real question is, should we just keep it and keep the door locked? Or should we be able to open that door and expose that information to others within large organizations so they can actually use this important information to help power and supercharge better business decision making? And combining that with the incredibly rapid advances around artificial intelligence, now is a really great time for records management globally to be able to leverage technology, to be able to address business need, and also to be able to address the issue of our topic today, which is how do you avoid getting fined. So thanks for being here. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you, David. We also have ICAG Partners Executive Director and my colleague, Kirk Cushing. Please introduce yourself, record management experience, and one takeaway for our audience for today's session, Kirk.
Thanks, Videsh. Thanks, David. I'm Kirk Cushing. I'm the Executive Director, as Videsh said, of ICAG Partners. I have 30 years of experience in financial services, mostly running the operations and compliance of wealth advisors and asset management groups. I've implemented, as a business person, I've implemented 3 full records management programs, including the technology surround them. And as a consultant, I've led Tier 1 institutions in remodeling, implementation, and adoption of records management programs. The takeaway that I would say for today is, look, there's reputational risk, there's financial risk, and there's risk to your people. If you want to comply with the regulatory issues properly in record keeping and record management, if you don't use technology, you're going to use people's time. If you use technology properly, you can make it a little bit more seamless and use less of your people's time. Thanks.
Thanks, Kirk. Finally, Subhash Roy, CEO of ICAG Partners. Please introduce yourself, your current role, record management experience, and one takeaway for our audience for today's session.
Thank you, Videsh. And I think I spoke at the beginning. I'm Subhash. I've got 30+ years of experience within data risk and records management. I've done more than 100, data and records transformation program. What can I say? I've been working a lot with Tier 1 and Tier 2 Chief Risk Officer, Head of Records Management, CDOs. And I think one takeaway for me today is to be able to share with you, my interactions, my knowledge of working with a number of regulators who have been issuing those fines in the last 12 months, what works, what does not work, and hopefully a set of quick wins that organizations will find, really useful. And I think most importantly, how to get started on a remediation program. Because often, if you're joining as a records manager in a large bank or a large organization, things could become a bit scary. Things could become very complicated. I think we have the right hints and tips in terms of how to get you started. Thank you.
Thank you, Subhash. So today's format is going to be that we will be spending 30 minutes topic, and we will address all these questions in the end. So please use the Q&A feature to add questions as we go along. Kirk, can you please take it along from here? Kirk, you're on mute.
Thanks, Videsh. So briefly, we've discussed it in the last couple of slides and with our introductions. ICAG Partners, who are we? So we are a network of consultants that come from former MBBs, Big Fours, and Tier 1, Tier 2 financial institutions as executives. We have vast amounts of experience, well over 100 years of experience in records management between all of our partners. In addition to records management, we do provide digital and technology solutions, strategy solutions, and we have a practice in ESG. Our point is to work with very selective clients and partners and to ensure that we make a positive impact in their communities. Subhash?
So let me get started. Thank you, Kirk. In terms of the fines and penalties, that we've been seeing in the market, right? I mean, again, some of the messages here really sort of says everything, isn't it? I mean, we saw the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commissions, literally finding 16 Wall Street firms, some of whom I can see today listening to this conversation. So you will know, perhaps you have the direct exposure of that discussions with the SEC. And effectively, some of the firms actually admitted sort of, in terms of regulatory requirements, if you talk about the WORM rules, right? So, right ones, read many, rule number 70.4 of the SEC, which talks about, keeping appropriate record of off-channel and on-channel communications. I think we are now seeing, obviously, with faster digitalization, it is really imperative for financial sector organizations to keep a clear set of record types, record classes, and then apply that consistently across all of your data and records across the organization. And that is super difficult, right? Getting the integration right, getting the infrastructure right. And that's what we're going to talk about, right? We then saw, and this is literally 20 days, not even 3 weeks old, both HSBC Securities Services in the United States and Scotiabank were hit, right? HSBC were fined 45 million, Scotiabank in total were fined $15 million. Again, these are big numbers, and also think about the sort of reputational risk, right? And my only questions would be, and I hope not, but what if these headlines include your organization, the organization that you represent, right? What experience did you have? How does that impact your remediation program? What are your plans? I mean, we are going to share some thoughts in terms of interactions we are having on both with the regulators and the regulated firms, but it'd be good to hear your perspectives at the end of this conversation. Let's go to next page and let's sort of take a look at some of the key regulations that really impacts financial sector when it comes to records management. I think the most important regulation that we have, particularly in North America, right, in the United States, we have the SEC and the FINRA regulations, right, on safe and accurate record keeping. These regulations are very strict, and they talk about creating what we call a records management lifecycle, and that starts from creating records to disposal of records, right? And that sort of talks about creating a harmonious records retention rules through appropriate technology, but not only that, apply those retention rules across record archival, records disposal, and at the same point in time, ensure that every organizations who are licensed by SEC, right, they need to ensure that electronic records management for WORM rules are appropriately defined and used. And there is an additional requirement that I think I would like to mention here from 1st of January next year, is that you cannot anymore maintain a list of records on spreadsheets. Okay, SEC has now sort of summoned every organization that's been licensed by SEC to have electronic records management. Okay, and again, I know there are many organizations here who has already embarked on an electronic records management journey, but you still have got a number of your corporate records on physical forms. That rule will change everything. You will now need to transition everything on digital records management, on electronics records management. Otherwise, there is another barrage of fines and difficult conversations with the regulators. There is another point around off-channel communication and sort of surveillance on communications. We know that there are other regulations in the Wall Street, for example, the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reforms Act. In European Union, we have the MiFID II regulations. They talk about electronic communication surveillance. I think what we are now seeing very uniquely is that the record management regulations are also starting to look at electronic communications, and in particular off-channel communication that I keep talking about. If you have a situation in your organization where employees are utilizing WhatsApp or any other messaging services that is not permitted or that is not within your organization layer, in case the regulators comes to know about that and they have got evidence to see, and it includes customer records or financial records, there is a huge chance that they will issue a fine. And that was effectively the case with HSBC Securities and Scotiabank, in the last 3 weeks. So really important to understand the changes in 1704 that's coming onto force from 1st of January next year. Everything needs to be on digital form. Number 2, if you have off-channel communication records, any discussions off-channel, you need to ensure those are following records lifecycle in terms of how they are created, how they have been retained, how they have been used, and you need to be able to dispose them off. Okay. There are a couple of others I'd like to mention here. CFTC rule number 1.31. That's a very big one again, and it talks about, and this particularly applies to the capital market firms who are effectively, regulated by the CFTC as a regulator. We see that several banks are fined for not following CFTC rules. There are some updates that's happening on CFTC rule under the National Archival Guidelines in the United States. Again, those changes will come in force from 1st of January 2024. That rule is rule number 6020.01. I don't want to get very technical, but again, it's really important to take a look at CFTC rules because organizations often get fined by both CFTC and SEC. And in Europe and in the UK, we have European Securities Market Agency, ESMA. In the UK, we have the Financial Conduct Authority. They have very similar regulations in the United States. And obviously, they are also following the path of the US regulators. They are going after the same organizations, right? So if your organizations are fined in the US, highly likely you will be investigated. You will be looked at by the UK and the European regulators as well. There are key other regulations in terms of data protection. So GDPR, the California Privacy Act, the Colorado Privacy Act, the New York DFS, Department of Financial Services privacy regulations. Again, if you have personal records, you need to ensure the records management lifecycle is being properly followed. Let's go to the next page. So in terms of what does all of that mean, right? And sort of, just summarize that. I think, we see the need for yourself, for financial institutions, to really rethink and redesign, redeploy your enterprise records management strategy. And that perhaps mean you will need to look at your records management controls framework. You will need to further update your records management procedure, records management standard, and also update your records management policy in line with the changes in regulations. Otherwise, it's difficult for a large or medium-sized organization to enforce these rules across different parts of the business. So do think about that. And we have a special expertise about these areas that we will talk about in a later part of these discussions, right? Tak, over to you.
So I would also just add there, guys, I know there's a lot of astute records management personnel on this call from a number of tier 1 financial firms. And if your organization isn't making this a priority, those headlines that we saw earlier should be eye-opening. It should not be too difficult if proposed the right way to get the budget that you need to relook at your records management program and to deploy some technology solutions and cover your operating model, cover your framework, cover your policy, right? So we help firms develop their policy, review their policy against a framework and an operating model, right? But you have to, and many of you on this call, I'm sure, are doing this, and I'm sure you're doing this on a daily basis, but you have to evaluate more than just what's coming down with Microsoft. Microsoft Purview is a great solution for your unstructured data and your unstructured records. And its flexibility is there, but it does not cover everything. A lot of what we've been focusing on has been where the fines have been, and that's been on your on your structured data and your off-channel communications, right? So off-channel communications are popping up every day. And the only way for us to ensure as groups that we're catching that is to work with our technology folks internally, but also externally review those different solutions that work in each different part of the life cycle of records, right? So obviously you've got the policy and regulatory compliance at the top of your framework. You've got your key operating processes and your efficiencies. You've got your data, records, technology, and analytics. And you've got your people and your skills. Each one of these different parts of the framework of your operating model have solutions in the technology space. We do a lot of filtering of all the technology partners that are, or all the technology solutions that are out there in this space, and we create strategic partners here at ICAG. And so what we do is we review and we look and we try to find the best solution for you. Your return on investment, remember, is oftentimes just keeping the regulators from finding something. So it's hard to quantify until you look back at those headlines. So keep in mind, a properly structured records management program can have technology inclusive in every part of your operating model. Back to you, Subhash.
Thank you so much. And that was very useful to think about how can you design an overall framework on a quick turnaround basis. I think what Kark talked about can actually be designed in a matter of 4 to 6 weeks. And when we look at, obviously without taking any names, some of the organizations that are fined, regulators who are going back 5, 7, even 10 years in one of the organizations that they saw non-compliance was rife, right? And it was going on for a very long time. And when you think about you actually can turn this around in a sort of 4 to 6 weeks work, then I think it's astonishing. And, it's not that this organization has not invested on their records management technology. I think it has perhaps not been invested in the right way, right? And not with the right sort of expertise here. What I'm sharing here today is one of the particular use cases that we have been working with the tier 1 financial institutions, that works across the United States and Europe. It has a very large customer base across investment banking as well as commercial banking and retail banking. And what they clearly felt is that, and this is the the chief data office and the chief records management office, is that without utilizing some of the advanced technology, which I'm pretty sure my colleague David is going to talk about here, without using some of the advanced technology that we see today, cybersecurity, financial crime, AML type risks are using, if we are not able to utilize those alerts-driven technology on records management, it is almost impossible. I think there is that point around needle in a haystack that I'm pretty sure David will come and talk a little bit more about. But because if you are sitting in the group or maybe even in a business, you are running the records function, how do you find the misuse? Okay, so what we have designed here, and I know it's in a difficult graph to go through, so apologies for that, but in high level, 3 steps of advanced technology or RegTech, whatever you call it, using here, is that at the top level, we have what we call a set of records management, records misuse alerts, okay, that we have developed from our experience. What constitute a records misuse in line with SEC, FINRA, CFTC, ESMA, FCA regulations? We have designed that. We have then utilized a combination of advanced technologies such as, combination of optical character recognition, RPAs, and some of the machine learning natural language processing technologies to really run those alerts onto your key systems and applications, what we call the system of records, right? So run those alerts on your key system of records. Now, potentially a system of records could be, Microsoft Outlook, right? Or Microsoft SharePoint, where you have a large amount of communications data being built on a daily basis between your staff, but also between staff and customers. It could be a client onboarding system. It could be a financial management system, for example, Oracle Financials. But when you run these alerts, it will automatically identify and escalate any potential misuse, which is not in line with your standards, which is not in line with your records management policy. And then what we have is that we have records management analysts, which are basically nothing but control specialists, but they are trained on records management. They're going to look at all these alerts, and they're going to decide, are there anything absolutely important for us to take a look? When we see what came out from the investigations of the SEC on something like HSBC Securities, the reason the fine was so big is that not only the bank did not have the right sort of framework to address the failure and the fine were imposed, they actually did not have any proactive procedure. So remember one thing, the regulators are looking at you as an organization to create that proactive steps, to manage the risk, to address the risk, to highlight if there is any potential non-compliance in terms of records management failure, and take appropriate steps. If you are not able to demonstrate you have the right records risk management procedure, then the fine will get even bigger. So in these 3 steps, okay, record misuse alerts, then the alerts runs using automatic technology, create a visualization dashboard, and then you have got a set of selected experts who are looking at your dashboards and taking the right steps, which frankly will be your existing records management operations colleagues, your record steward. If we train them on this way, that can be. So we're not talking about any new investment in terms of, doubling your team size, none of that. Actually, you can perhaps reduce your team size, but you're maturing in terms of utilizing, your new records management technology. So that's what it is. This is an illustration purpose. If you want to discuss more, do get in touch. We are here to support you, to help you, to take you through this journey. Clark, David, any things to add?
Yeah, thanks for that. I would just add that, the way I look at this, compliance or non-compliance is really a design issue for most organizations. And what I mean by design issue is that records organizations at large banks and other large enterprises in different industries are still relying on methods and procedures from 5 to 10 years ago. The idea that you can throw more bodies, and Subhas just hinted at this, to solve this problem is really not possible, especially with the velocity of data creation that's occurring in every enterprise around the world. So it's really more about having the right design system in place, which this, I think, chart starts to lay out. And it's also the willingness to look at the rapid advancement in new technologies, which really automate a lot of that functionality that really has been done in the past by human beings, but really now the technology is at a state, a dependable level of maturity where you can get really strong answers without having a lot of people involved in trying to look for needles in haystacks.
Very good.
And again, I think this is a very important page I want to share with you. I mean, we, as I said, 100+ organization within financial sector looking at records management technology. I think I can say hands on heart, what you normally have as an organization, right, is a myriad of systems, a myriad of applications that has system of records, that has records. You have customer record, financial record, personal records, all of that, right? We see organizations having ERP systems, so enterprise resource planning system, SAP, Oracle, NetSuite. We see you having customer relationship management systems, so CRMs. You obviously have, most organizations have Microsoft Office, 365, SharePoint. You also have data feeds. You have customer-related supply database, customer database. You have websites. You have portals. Basically, there are different set of applications which creates billions of records, right? But then what is your current records management technology, if I may say so? Most organizations I see, they use, similar to the Policy Center, which is obviously from Iron Mountain, which provides very much a static view of your records register. It's a good practice view of your record classes, your record types, and how those record classes and record types should be applied across the organizations, across all the systems that you see on this page on the left-hand side. But actually, Iron Mountain does not provide any capability for you to go and test that whether that has been actually utilized by different businesses. You have no guarantee that what you have as a set of principles in Iron Mountain has actually been utilized, right? So there is a big gap, because regulators can come, they can challenge a particular business, they find your policy is not appropriately adhered to even by your organization. There you go. There is a risk of fine and penalty. And then second, some organizations, they are looking at Microsoft, and then they're looking at one of the platform called Microsoft Purview, which is a newish records management platform, which does comply with records management lifecycle from creation to disposal, legal hold, retention automation. But unfortunately, because it's still a Microsoft platform, it works on records and data that are still saved within Microsoft. So what then happens is many organizations is kind of in a limbo, in my view, that a large part of its records do not really have any technology. And to David's point, then they start throwing resources, both from the group level, but also on the business level, but never really go to that level of maturity where you can actually confidently say, I have got a handle on my records management. Okay, so from that perspective, then I can tell you what you need going forward. Okay, what you need going forward is this automatic controls and reporting of your records risk, and particularly what we saw, what's coming on our way from 1st of January 2024. That's what is expected by NARA Rule 620, SEC 1704, updated 1704, CFTC Rule 3.1, right? You need to be able to identify off-channel communications and off-channel record. You need to have those alerts-driven mechanism. You need to be able to create what we call that business insights in terms of how records have been saved and utilized, right? How you need to have some sort of an automatic surveillance here on your records. Without that, there is a high chance that organizations will still be continued to be fined, and these fines are large fines. They bring significant reputational risks as well. Okay, and you need to have some reporting going on. Reporting is very important. Just taking records register from Iron Mountain Policy Center or looking at Microsoft Purview is not going to cut it. Doc, I'm going to hand it over back to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that's a good segue. So one thing that as Subhash was just alluding to, we all used to have the just the policy center or just our records inventory, right? And it had all we need as far as here's what the records retention schedule is, here's what the disposal methodology is, et cetera. But it wasn't an automated process, and I think Subhash alluded to the fact that the next step down, often in organizations or departments, was a spreadsheet of what records we have in storage or what records we put where, right? And then we go through and we follow through the life cycle there. Well, not only is that going away, but our marketing departments, our individual advisors, our individual employees are starting to get programs that have artificial intelligence included in them. Matter of fact, the Microsoft Office 365 suite and their Google suite of just routine Word and Excel have artificial intelligence assistants in them. Well, so does your CRM. So if these things start getting turned on, there's going to be, talk about thousands of messages, talk about tens and hundreds of thousands of messages and emails going out every day. So unless you've been hiding under a rock, you know that generative artificial intelligence is out there. It's a fast learning technology. I think we're into, with ChatGPT, we're into version 4.0, which is actually real time. It's no longer looking at data back at 2021. And that's not only is that the difference between 3.5 and 4, but it's also learning at a quicker pace. It has a lot more behind it, right? More and more programs are being developed on this technology. You've got, ChatGPT, you've got Bard, you've got Bing. The Bing assistant in it right now has the free version of ChatGPT 4 in it. So this artificial intelligence actually expands our risk, right? The records management technology and architecture needs to start considering that, the impacts of these developments. And I think what you'll learn from David is you got to fight fire with fire, right? So your technology in your program now needs to be adaptable, now needs to have AI in it, needs to have the new technology. And I'm going to keep my comments short because I know we're running out of time. I'm going to pass it over to David, and he's going to start talking a little bit more about this subject.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite slides that I use, and it always is amazing to me. I've been talking to records managers, for 20 years, but recently over the last 2 or 3 years, especially as AI has become more dominant in our life cycle, there's still a large corpus of records managers out there who don't trust AI. And it always kind of fundamentally to me is, well, if you can trust AI to help you change lanes traveling at 75 miles an hour, why can't you use AI to help you classify data? And I think that's really what it comes down to. Subhas has laid out a really important foundation around that the legacy approaches, the way people have been doing things in the past, simply aren't good enough to deal with things in the present because the volume of information is so large. We've also talked to a lot of customers who have asked us to apply our technology to their existing records corpus, and it's amazing how inaccurate that corpus is. We've talked a little bit about Policy Center, and there's other applications like Virgo that are out there that really provide tremendously powerful lists of records retention rules. The real question is, how do you automate the application of those retention rules to the data as it's being created? And then how do you manage that in a life cycle? And frankly, that is a perfect application for AI to do. And we have deployed multiple ways of using AI in our system platform. Maybe you can take through the stack. We actually have 4 different kinds of AI in our stack. What we've learned initially is that AI as a specific application is very powerful, but it becomes quantumly more powerful when you combine different AI platforms to address core issues around auto classifications, around issues around discovery. It is amazing to me how many organizations that we go in and talk to, they're still trying to grapple with the initial concept of discovery of information, which later leads to identifying records, which then has to be connected to retention and file plans. But the reality is that these new technologies in combination really provide an incredibly powerful tool that changes the paradigm from the legacy concept of spreadsheets, which, we've already said that, starting next year, spreadsheets aren't an acceptable way to solve this problem. But the spreadsheets also allow organization by removing spreadsheets, by using generative applications like using ChatGPT. By the way, our latest release of our solution has ChatGPT included in it, and we found it to be incredibly powerful, not only in terms of being able to identify records, but also to sharpen the concept around classification of that information. But again, ChatGPT, supervised machine learning, they need to have guardrails put around it, and they also need to have the ability to be applied to very specific situations as rather than having one AI-based solution apply to all different kinds of use cases that records managers face on a daily basis. So we've spent a lot of time looking at ChatGPT, and actually, when I pulled this slide together, I've been using it for a couple of talks that I've been giving around the country. These answers that you see on the screen were actually generated by Bing, by the Bing Copilot in Chat that Microsoft has deployed. But what I've done is I've taken those answers and I've verified it, and really the lessons that we've learning is that you can achieve tremendous accuracy and reliability using ChatGPT in conjunction with other applications. But there are specific warnings, and specifically, when we talk about using ChatGPT to identify records, we're not turning ChatGPT loose on the entire universe of information that's on the internet. ChatGPT, when it's deployed within an enterprise environment, is only looking at repositories that are inside the firewall. So, there's a common misunderstanding of ChatGPT. Well, if I use ChatGPT to help me classify records, that information is going to be polluted with information outside my firewall. That doesn't happen. But I think also one other lesson that's really coming online is by using ChatGPT as part of a solution to identify, classify, and manage records through a life cycle, that information is also discoverable. So the good news about the latest generation of ChatGPT, it does come full with citations, it comes full with sourcing, and the ability to explain result, whether it's to a regulator or to somebody's manager at questioning why the recall is what it is. All of these things are really being driven by this great new technology, but you also have to put it in context of looking at the solution as a bigger in a bigger way as opposed to a very focused way or minute way. And it's only when you can apply the guardrails with the answers that are coming back through ChatGPT or any sort of supervised machine learning technology or any sort of document cognition technology. That's when that's when these new platforms really become effective for a records manager to use to not only respond to regulatory inquest, but also to make sure that the corpus that they're managing is accurate, is producible, and reliable. Again, this is another answer when I asked ChatGPT, when I asked Bing Copilot how ChatGPT would impact a records manager's role. This is the answer that comes back. And frankly, it's a pretty satisfying answer from my perspective. And I do, again, want to some aspects of your job. It's really taking the rote, the heavy lifting, it's taking the reliance off of individuals, off of employees to classify information, using policy as the driver, and then be able to have that policy direct a software solution to actually repeatedly look for information that needs to be produced in response to a regulatory inquest. So it's really important, again, that while these are very powerful technologies on their own, they are not the panacea. They're not the answer to the total question. It's in more of a context. I think Subas or Kirk might have talked at the beginning, because all these AI technologies are moving so fast. How do I know what I buy today is going to be useful in the future? And the reality is that unless you look at a solution that can adapt to new AI technologies as a plugin, an investment you make today is not going to be valuable 2 years from now. So we spent a lot of time at Encompass engineering our solution that makes it possible to not only use what we provide from an AI perspective, but also to constantly update and upgrade AI-based capabilities that are in the solution, which I think as we go forward is going to be a really important technical strategy that records managers are going to have to consider as they look at new technologies to help them and their organizations do their job better. Kirk, you're on mute.
Thank you, David. That was very helpful and educational. You actually answered the first question that I have in the Q&A here, which was, since technology is changing so rapidly with AI, how do we know that what we buy won't be outdated next year, right? So as David said, you need to consider the partners that you have, and we can help with that, to make sure that they have the latest and greatest technology and are considering, what's their future roadmap look like, considering that, because things are moving very quickly right now. So that's a very good question. Thank you. And then the next question and last question before we wrap is, can you give me an example of the return on investment on a proper technology spend for my records management program? And David, I'll kick this off to you because I know you have an answer for that.
Yeah, I do. We've done some pretty interesting calculations not in the financial services space, but in the pharmaceutical space, where the inability to correlate the calculated value in a business contract and relate that information into a sales management system is very hard to do. And so we're using AI to help accelerate that process of understanding how those two things can be connected. If you were to do this manually, you would have to hire lots of people, put them in an office somewhere, and pour through 10, 20, 30,000 documents looking for very specific things, pulling that out, putting it onto a spreadsheet, building a report. The cost of doing that is not only a time-consuming task, it's also a task that can be fraught with a lot of issues around accuracy. Because if I look at a business contract and Subas looks at a business contract, we might be looking for the same thing, but we might pull out two totally different values. So, and the other thing is that software solutions that do this on an automated basis really don't have to take an hour off for lunch. They don't have to take time off for vacation, and they never call in sick. So I think it's a really tremendous value to the ROI, the ability to understand what you're spending now on manual work compared to how much of that cost you can eliminate. That is a value proposition that can be easily calculated and used as part of your justification for building a business case to acquire systems and solutions that allow you to automate the rote work that has been part of all of our legacy foundations in responding to regulators and others.
Thanks, David, and I want to thank our participants for sharing the latest find that JP Morgan in the chat that JP Morgan came up with. I think it was just a couple of days ago. We were kind of spinning that around the office too, weren't we, Subhas? So I know we've run out of time, everybody, and we're right on time. I'm going to thank Subhas and Videsh for taking time out of their busy days to come help us with this webinar. I'm going to thank our special guest, David from Encompass. Thanks so much. Very insightful information on what's going on at Encompass, but also what's going on over the industry and records management, right? We are going to take a break from webinars until the end of the summer. So our third webinar will be in the fall, and we will make sure that all of you have information on that. We are also going to send out a copy of or a link to our YouTube channel that will have a copy of this webinar that you can share with your senior management to ensure that they know that you need to spend a little money now, but to save money in the future, right? And I want to thank everybody that's been on this call and been following ICAG Partners